The hard person, the one who resists, who argues, who pushes back on everything, is not broken. They're not damaged goods, and they're not incapable of love, success, or growth. What they are is unpolished, and that is a powerful distinction. You see, we live in a world where conformity is rewarded and obedience is praised. We're taught from early childhood to follow the rules, stay in line, be quiet, smile when spoken to, and sit when told. But the hard person, they don't do that. They challenge the system, they question authority, they raise their voice not because they want attention, but because they refuse to be ignored. And it's in that resistance, in that refusal to bend easily, where the greatest potential often hides. We've been trained to believe that ease equals good, that agreeable people are the kindest, that the quiet ones are the wisest, and that those who make things difficult are somehow lacking. But that's a shallow way of looking at human nature. The truth is, some of the most powerful forces in life are uncomfortable. Fire burns, water floods, wind destroys, and yet those very forces also give life. They shape the earth, and they renew what has grown stale. A hard person is not broken, they are simply untamed. And within that untamed spirit lies a rare kind of energy, a focused, determined, sometimes volatile energy that, once understood, can move mountains. Think about it, a diamond is nothing more than carbon, crushed and hardened by unimaginable pressure over time. On the outside, before it's cut, a diamond looks like just another rock, nothing special, rough, dark, even ugly. But it's in the transformation, in the process of refinement, where its true brilliance is revealed. People are no different. Some arrive soft and agreeable, easy to shape, easy to guide. Others arrive hard, resistant, strong, willed, but that's not a flaw, that's a signal. It means they were born with fire in them. And fire doesn't follow orders, fire leads. We've been sold this myth that we need to fix people, that the hard person is a problem that needs to be solved. But they don't need fixing. They need focus. They need direction. A blade without a handle is dangerous, but once it's forged, once it's gripped with purpose, it becomes a tool of great precision. The hard person is like that blade, misunderstood by most, feared by some, but when you stop trying to soften them and instead help them harness what's already inside, something incredible happens. They begin to rise, they begin to transform, not because you changed them, but because you believed in them. Too often, society slaps labels on people who don't fall in line, difficult, angry, unmanageable. These labels are lazy. They don't seek to understand, only to control. But control is not the path to greatness, awakening is. And you cannot awaken someone by silencing them. You awaken them by reminding them of who they are beneath the armor. Most hard people didn't start that way. Life made them that way. Disappointment, rejection, betrayal, these things don't leave people soft. They forge walls, they create strength, but not all strength looks the same. Some wear it on their sleeves, others wear it like a mask. And until you learn to see past the behavior and into the intention, you will always misjudge the hard person. There is a deep well of emotion inside those who come off tough. They've likely been dismissed, misunderstood, or told they were too much. So they learn to protect their truth with edge, but behind that edge there is often an extraordinary depth of insight, of creativity, of love. The kind of love that doesn't follow trends, the kind that fights for what it believes in, the kind that stays when others run. You don't find that kind of substance in someone who's never had to struggle with their own fire. You find it in the ones who had to learn how to live with the intensity of their spirit in a world that kept trying to dim it. And let's be honest, some of the most influential figures in history were labeled hard people. They were stubborn, rebellious, forming, they were told to stop, to give up, to be more normal, but they didn't, because something inside them refused to be tamed, and thank God for that. Because without those hard spirits, we would have no breakthroughs, no revolutions, no new ideas. The hard person is often a carrier of the future, and the future never comes easy. It demands people who are willing to push, to stand alone if they have to keep going when it would be easier to quit. These aren't broken people, these are born leaders buried under layers of misunderstanding and judgment. There's a reason some people don't fit into the molds society has created, because they weren't born to fit in. They were born to break the mold, but before that can happen, they have to stop seeing their hardness as a curse. They have to stop believing the lie that being difficult means being defective, because the truth is their edge, their grit, their refusal to bow down is their superpower. And once they start to see that for themselves, they become unstoppable. What looks like resistance is often a hidden gift. At first glance, the hard person seems like a problem. They challenge authority, they push boundaries, they question everything, and they never quite seem to fall in line with what's expected. Most people look at that and see defiance, arrogance, or trouble, but what they're missing is the message behind the resistance. Resistance is never random. It's a signpost, a signal that something deeper is at play. And when someone resists, when they push back against the current, it's often because they're carrying something powerful inside them, something unspoken, something they've either hidden from the world or that the world has tried to suppress. It's not the resistance that's the problem, it's the misunderstanding of what that resistance really is. The hard person often lives with a kind of internal fire that doesn't shut off easily. That fire may come from pain, it may come from passion, it may come from a place of deep inner conviction, but wherever it comes from, it gives them a drive that refuses to sit still. And when that energy doesn't have a place to go, when it isn't understood, channeled, or honored, it manifests as rebellion. It shows up as argument, as distance, as intensity. But intensity is not the enemy, intensity is a tool. It's power that hasn't yet found its purpose, and this is where so many people miss the mark with the hard person. They try to quiet the rebellion instead of listening to the message it's carrying. People don't resist without reason. Even if the reason is buried deep in the subconscious, even if they can't articulate it in words, there's always a reason behind the behavior. Sometimes that reason is protection. Maybe they've been wounded. Maybe they've trusted too easily in the past and been betrayed. Maybe they've been told they weren't good enough, weren't smart enough, weren't worthy, and so they build resistance like armor, a way to say, you won't control me, you won't hurt me again. That wall may look like defiance from the outside, but on the inside, it's a fortress built around a heart that once cared too deeply and got crushed for it. Other times, resistance is a sign of vision. The hard person may not yet know how to express what they see, what they feel, or what they dream of, but they know instinctively that something is off, something doesn't sit right. So they resist the rules, they challenge the way things are done, and it's not because they want to be difficult. It's because their spirit knows there's a better way, and until they find that way, they won't settle. This kind of resistance is not weakness, it's the first breath of innovation. It's the spark of genius disguised as stubbornness. It is for now the UNDRECOSGNIZED open. Teachers label the hard kid as disruptive. Employers label the hard worker as insubordinate. Families label the hard sibling as selfish or cold. And in every case, what's being ignored is the truth behind the behavior. A person pushing back is a person trying to express something they may not yet know how to say. And if no one ever takes the time to listen, to see beyond the surface, that energy gets buried deeper. It becomes resentment, it becomes silence, it becomes lost potential. But when someone does take the time to see through it, to see that the resistance is pointing towards something deeper, transformation begins. Because suddenly the hard person doesn't feel like they have to fight to be heard. They feel understood. And when a person feels understood, their defenses begin to drop, not because someone forced them to soften, but because someone made it safe for them to be real. And that's the difference between suppression and support. Suppression demands silence, support invites truth. And the hard person has a lot of truth to share, but they will not offer it up cheaply. You have to earn their trust. You have to prove you can handle the depth they carry. Underneath all that resistance, there is usually a gift so strong, so raw, that it intimidates even the person carrying it. Imagine holding a lightning bolt in your hands, something so full of force that you don't know what to do with it. That's what it's like for many hard people. They feel the voltage inside them, and they're scared of what might happen if they let it out. Will people run? Will they get judged? Will they lose control? So they clamp down, they hold back, or they lash out because no one taught them how to turn electricity into light. But electricity is light when it's understood, and resistance is often just that, misdirected electricity. Potential, looking for a place to shine. The most important thing to understand is that the hard person isn't trying to make life difficult for others. They're trying to figure out how to live in a world that doesn't always make sense to them. Their standards may be higher. Their tolerance for inauthenticity may be lower. They may refuse to play along with traditions that feel hollow or systems that feel broken. And while that can be frustrating to those who want comfort and ease, it's also what makes them powerful. Because the ones who challenge what is are often the ones who create what could be. And it all starts with resistance, not as an act of defiance, but as a cry for something more real, more meaningful, more aligned. So, when you meet the hard person, when you encounter that resistance, don't rush to change them, label them, or correct them. Get curious. Ask what they are protecting. Ask what they care about. Ask what they've seen that no one else seems to notice. Because hidden inside their resistance, there's often a gift waiting to be unwrapped, a truth waiting to be spoken, a future waiting to be built, a power waiting to be claimed. Every strong oak was once a stubborn seed. That's not just a metaphor. It's a truth that echoes through every life that begins small, overlooked, even dismissed. When people see a seed, they don't immediately see the potential it carries. They see something insignificant, something unimpressive, but inside that seed is the blueprint for something vast, something powerful, something enduring. It just doesn't look like it yet, and in the same way when you see a hard person, someone who seems resistant, difficult, or inflexible, you're not seeing the full story. You're seeing them in seed form. You're seeing the beginning stages of something far greater than what's on the surface. A stubborn seed has to push through layers of dirt, through resistance, through pressure. It grows in darkness long before it ever touches the light. It breaks itself open, cracks its own shell, and stretches blindly towards something it doesn't even fully understand yet. That's what growth is. That's what transformation requires. The hard person is not stuck. They are in the process. They are in that place between pressure and emergence, and it takes a certain kind of inner force to survive that. The kind of force that shows up on the outside as stubbornness, as refusal, as defiance, but all that is just a mask worn by something deeper, the determination to become more. We've been taught to love the outcome. People admire the oak, but they rarely celebrate the seed. They don't appreciate the difficulty of that journey. And because of that, when we see someone who is still fighting their way through the early stages, we judge them as if they're already supposed to be a finished product. But nobody becomes an oak overnight. Nobody becomes steady, wise, and unshakable without first being wild, uncertain, and messy. The hard person isn't failing their forging. They're growing in silence. They're wrestling with the very process that will one day make them unbreakable. What makes this process more complicated is that the world often doesn't offer the hard person any grace. It doesn't give them room to be in between. Society wants people to be compliant early, well behaved early, agreeable early, but what if that's not their nature? What if their soul came here with a different rhythm, a different pace? What if they're not here to follow, they're here to lead, and leaders don't grow soft, they grow strong. And strength takes time, it takes failure, it takes rebellion, it takes friction. The hard person may not look like leadership material yet, but that's only because they haven't been placed in the right environment. A seed doesn't sprout on concrete, it needs fertile soil, it needs the right conditions. If you've ever seen a tree break through pavement, you know that force doesn't come from gentleness. It comes from persistence, it comes from something inside that refuses to quit. And while that may scare some people, while that kind of energy may be labeled as too much or too intense, it's exactly what's required for greatness. The stubbornness people try to correct in others may be the very engine that pushes them toward their purpose. That edge, that refusal to comply with low standards or empty systems, is the mark of someone with depth. It's the mark of someone who doesn't just want to live. They want to grow, and growth, real growth, is never smooth. It's rugged, it's uncomfortable, it's defiant. You don't get to become an oak without first surviving the storms. And you don't survive the storms unless you've already been through the breaking, the bending, the roots learning how to dig deeper. And that's what the hard person is doing. Even if they don't realize it, they're building roots, they're developing endurance. They're forming the strength that doesn't show up in polite conversations or easy relationships, but reveals itself when everything falls apart. They're learning day by day what it means to stand tall, even if right now all they feel is buried. And let's not forget, oak trees don't just grow for themselves, they become shelter, they become protection. They become symbols of strength to others, and the hard person, once transformed, carries that same potential. They can become the one others turn to when life gets real, not because they were always gentle or easy, but because they learned how to rise from difficulty. They know pain, they know struggle, they know how it feels to be misunderstood, underestimated, labeled. And because of that, their strength is not shallow, it's rooted. Their wisdom is not borrowed, it's earned. They didn't read about growth in a book. They lived it from the inside out. Too often, people try to dig up the seed because it's not growing fast enough. They question it, criticize it, abandon it. But growth has its own schedule. You can't rush what's real. And the hard person doesn't need to be rushed. They need to be respected. They need to be given space to emerge. Because when they do, when they finally push through all that dirt, all that pressure, they don't just rise. They rise with power, with clarity, with a story that no one can deny. Every stubborn seed that keeps fighting, keeps stretching, keeps reaching, eventually becomes something so strong that it can't be shaken. Not by time, not by storms, not by opinion. Energy, when misunderstood, becomes rebellion. It's one of the most overlooked truths about human behavior, especially when dealing with hard personalities. Most people only notice the outcome. The argument, the refusal, the walk out, the silence, the eruption, and they miss what's underneath. They don't see the energy that fuels it, the raw, powerful, misunderstood force that has no outlet, no guidance, no direction. When you don't understand energy, when you don't give it room to move or a purpose to fulfill, it turns against its own source. It implodes or explodes, and this is what happens with so many people who are labeled difficult. They are walking around with power they were never taught how to use. You can't extinguish energy, you can only transform it. When a person carries high emotional energy, whether it's anger, passion, grief, ambition, or love, it doesn't just disappear because they're told to calm down. It finds another way out. And if they haven't been given tools to channel that energy, it will express itself in ways that seem chaotic. What looks like rebellion is often a lack of structure. It's energy that hasn't been given a mission. Like a river without banks, it spills everywhere, floods everything, becomes destructive. But that same river, with boundaries, with a channel, with purpose, can power entire cities. The hard person, the one who always seems to go against the current, is rarely doing it just for the sake of being difficult. They feel something inside that needs to move. Maybe it's creativity, maybe it's truth, maybe it's an inner voice that won't quiet down. But when the people around them don't understand what they're carrying, when their environment doesn't know how to hold space for it, the energy has nowhere to go. So it lashes out. It challenges authority, breaks rules, starts arguments, walks away from what doesn't feel aligned. And again, it's easy to judge this, easy to say, that person is out of control. But what if they were never meant to be controlled? What if they were meant to be guided? There's a difference between control and guidance. Control suppresses energy. It says, stop being like that, be more like this. It forces a mask, a behavior, a box. But guidance says, let's take that fire and show it where to go. Let's give it a target. Let's find out what you're really trying to say through all that noise. And this is where the hard person becomes a revolutionary, because once you give their energy a path, once you point it toward a purpose, it becomes fuel. They become focused, they become unstoppable. This is why leadership can't be about domination. It has to be about awareness. You don't lead hard people by pushing them down. You lead them by helping them rise. And that means understanding their energy before you criticize their actions. Most of the time, the hard person doesn't even know what they're rebelling for. They just know what feels wrong. They know what they don't want, but they haven't yet found the language or the clarity or the framework to build something better. And that's where the turning point lies, not in punishment, but in awakening. Look closely and you'll see that most rebellion is just purpose without vision. It's movement without meaning, and when you add meaning to that movement, everything changes. The person who once argued with every idea starts creating new ones. The person who once resisted all leadership becomes a leader themselves, not because someone forced them into submission, but because someone showed them how to aim the power they were born with. And that's all energy really needs: direction. The most misunderstood people are often the ones with the most unused power. And when that power gets buried under judgment, criticism, or shame, it turns bitter, it becomes destructive. But when it's acknowledged, honored, and channeled, it becomes a force of nature. The same energy that once burned bridges begins building them. The same person who used to fight against everything starts fighting for something. That's the shift. That's the alchemy of human potential. The truth is, many people are not misbehaving. They're misaligned. They're not broken. They're blocked. Their energy has been denied for so long that it no longer trusts itself. So it fights, it explodes, it runs, and until someone shows them a better way to direct that energy, they'll keep spinning in the same loops. You can't punish that out of someone. You have to help them remember who they are. Because deep inside every hard person is a part of them that still wants to matter, still wants to contribute, still wants to be understood. Their rebellion isn't hatred, it's hunger, a hunger for authenticity, a hunger for purpose, a hunger to use their voice in a world that keeps trying to silence it. And the moment that energy is seen, not feared, not judged, but seen, it starts to settle, not because it's giving up, but because it's finally being heard. And when energy is heard, it listens back, it collaborates, it participates, but first, someone has to recognize that the chaos on the outside is just misdirected power, a force that hasn't yet found its reason, a revolutionary that hasn't yet found their cause. And once that cause is revealed, what once looked like a problem becomes the very thing that leads the way forward. There is a kind of person who carries storms within them. Not storms that destroy, but storms that shake things loose, old patterns, outdated thinking, lies told for too long. They walk into rooms and the air changes, not because they're loud, not because they demand attention, but because they are attention. They draw focus not with charm but with presence. And yet, because they don't fit into expected shapes or acceptable tones, the world tries to mute them. These are the hard people, not because they are cruel, but because they are carved from truth. And truth, when spoken without apology, makes people uncomfortable. These are the people who are unyielding in what they believe, even when it costs them relationships, jobs, peace. They don't play well in false environments. They don't pretend for the sake of politeness. They don't bend just to be liked. They choose to stand, and in that choice they invite conflict. But what most don't understand is that this conflict is not a flaw, it's a furnace. It's where refinement happens, because anything that challenges comfort will always be seen as a threat, even when it's a gift. Especially when it's a gift. Hard people don't seek approval. That's not where they find their worth. Their value comes from something internal, something ancient, something unteachable. It's not arrogance, it's clarity. They know who they are, or if they don't know yet, they are relentless in the pursuit of finding out. They won't settle for shallow answers or surface-level lives. They want real emotion, real connection, real impact. And when they don't find it, they either walk away or tear the thing down until the truth is exposed. Most call it difficult, some call it rebellion, but what it really is purity, raw, unpolished purity. They were born with more than most can carry. More questions, more intensity, more sensitivity, more fire. From a young age, they were the ones who didn't fall in line. The ones who asked why when others just nodded. The ones who couldn't accept because I said so. And for that they were scolded, molded, pushed to the edges. But edges are where foundations are tested, where walls are cracked open, where light gets in. That's where they learned to survive. They didn't have the luxury of being easy, so they learned how to be honest. They didn't have the comfort of being accepted, so they learned how to be authentic. But authenticity costs. It makes people nervous, especially when it refuses to back down. So the hard person becomes isolated, misread, avoided. People whisper about them instead of asking questions. They assume instead of investigate, and still the hard person stays solid. They don't water themselves down for comfort. They don't exchange truth for applause. They stay in the fire until the fire becomes home. Until they become the kind of person who can walk through heat without flinching. That's where their power comes from, not from dominance, but from endurance. From the long, quiet seasons of being misunderstood and still choosing to be real. And when you really look at it, this world was never changed by the agreeable. It was changed by those who refused to fit, those who didn't care if they made people uncomfortable, because they knew that comfort never changed anything. They disrupted to rebuild, they questioned to uncover, they pressed so hard against the lie that it finally cracked open. These people are not just survivors, they are architects. They see the structures that are failing and dare to imagine new ones. They don't ask for permission to speak. They speak, and in doing so, give others permission to feel. To walk beside a hard person is to learn how to carry fire. Not everyone can do it. Some run, some resent. Some try to tame the flame, clip the wings, shrink the power. But the ones who stay, who choose to understand rather than control, witness something extraordinary. Because when the hard person is seen, truly seen, they begin to soften, not out of defeat, but out of trust. And that softness isn't weakness. It's power under direction, fire under purpose. It's the difference between a blaze that consumes and a torch that leads. What makes these people valuable is not their ease, it's their edge. It's the way they refuse to accept smallness in themselves or others. It's the way they demand depth in a world addicted to distraction. It's the way they call out what's false, not because they hate, but because they care too much to lie. That kind of care doesn't always feel gentle, but it's healing, because it burns away the masks, the illusions, the games. And when everything else has fallen, you're left with something rare. Someone who still stands, still speaks, still holds the line. These people don't come around often. When they do, they don't ask to be liked. They ask to be understood. They ask for truth in return, and if you can't give it, they'll keep walking. Not because they're heartless, but because their hearts are too full to waste on pretense. They know what's at stake. They know time is short. They don't live to please. They live to transform. And if that transformation comes through fire, so be it. They're not afraid of fire. They are fire.